Good morning, everyone. Your morning weather briefing for this Monday, June 11th, shows that there are no major changes in my forecast this morning versus what I presented yesterday. Again, this morning versus what I presented back on Friday, the big change is a lot more heat in the forecast for the end of this week, especially for Friday through about Sunday. As far as temperature and rainfall outlooks this morning, again, you can see that big change in the temperature forecast versus what I presented on Friday. Extensive area of above and much above normal temperatures in the Corn Belt. Again, the biggest change would be for about the June 15th through 17th time frame, but still looking at some moderation in temperatures longer term. Still looking at decent precipitation chances for a big portion of the nation as well for both the 6 to 10 and 11 to 15 day time frames. QPF discussion this morning. I'm not going to have any major disagreements with this forecast. As usual, the main question with regards to this forecast is the coverage that is going to be seen. I think the amounts, though, in this time frame look pretty appropriate for what is shown. In the day 6 to 7 time frame, this is a classic example of rim of fire activity with really no rain being seen for a big portion of the nation's midsection as a ridge of high pressure and a lot of heat dominates that area at that time, with rainfall revolving around the ridge of high pressure in a ring of fire fashion in the 6 to 7 time frame. This forecast mainly based off of the European model, and I have no problem with that. If the GFS were to be more correct, we would see rainfall covering a bigger portion of the Corn Belt during that time frame. Afternoon high temperatures yesterday, quite a temperature contrast in the Corn Belt yesterday that really enhanced rainfall across the region. You can see the 90 plus degree heat, even some localized 100 plus degree temperatures in southern portion of Nebraska, contrasting that with a lot of 70 degree temperatures that were seen yesterday in further northeastern areas of the Corn Belt where they had a lot of rain during the day yesterday. You can see that on the 18-hour rainfall map this morning. Note these really big totals that were received over the last 24 hours in southeastern section of Illinois and into a big portion of Indiana. You can see that on the radar estimated rainfall map. This is covering the entire weekend period. Note the extensive and locally heavy rains that occurred across a good portion of northeastern Iowa, far southwestern Wisconsin, big portion of Illinois, and into sections of Indiana. Also some bigger rains, especially over the last 24 hours in southwestern sections of Iowa. When you look at this map for the last 3 days, and especially when you look at the radar estimated rainfall map for the past 5 days, and this 5 day period will basically include the time frame when we have seen this recent ring of fire activity start to flare up, you can see that we've had some really nice rains in a very, very large portion of the Corn Belt. Basically, the area that I'm circling right now is an area that for the most part has seen more than an inch of rainfall during this 5 day time frame, and of course there have been areas that have seen extensive rains of a lot more than that. Some places seeing some rainfall amounts of 6 inches or more, especially across portions of Iowa and into a section of Illinois. As is usually the case, though, in summertime rainfall situations, you have your have-nots and your haves as far as rainfall is concerned. Certainly an area that has seen disappointing rainfall amounts in recent days, and an area that really needed to see that rainfall would be southeastern portion of Iowa into eastern Kansas and a big portion of Missouri. Only very small areas there getting appreciable rainfall during this 5 day period when ring of fire activity has really flared up. If you're looking at an area that has really seen massive improvement, clearly it would be a situation where these rains in central and eastern portion of Illinois and into west central portion of Indiana, that's an area that dropped into some abnormally dry conditions in the drought monitor map that came out this past Thursday. So when you consider the type of rains that have fallen there and the coverage of rain that has fallen, that's an area of the Corn Belt that has really done incredibly well, and rains that were incredibly beneficial for that area in recent days. Looking at the radar here early on this Monday morning, 3 areas of extensive rainfall, one in the northern plains, one in central portion of Iowa, and one still occurring in the southeastern portion of Illinois to add further benefit to what had been a very dry portion of the Corn Belt over the last several weeks. Radar forecast as of 7 o'clock today. The rain that is on the radar earlier this morning is largely going to be dissipating during the mid to late morning hours. We'll then see an additional flare-up of shower and thunderstorm activity in southeastern portion of the Corn Belt this afternoon, but your bigger focus of rainfall for this afternoon will be a flare-up of showers and thunderstorm, likely severe in nature, that will be getting going in western portions of the Corn Belt for this afternoon and lasting through the evening and possibly some of the overnight hours as a weak cool front starts to move into that area. The cool front in question will become located in southern portions of the region by the time we get to 7 o'clock in the evening on Wednesday, largely becoming stationary at that time. And I'll try to draw on that front here on the GFS and European operational maps. You can see that the European model as of 7 o'clock in the evening on Wednesday is starting to break out some rainfall on the northern portion of that front as warmer air starts to try to work into the Corn Belt at that time. GFS at that time does not have much rain, but it does break out some rainfall later on Wednesday night. Looking ahead towards surface features as of 7 o'clock in the morning on Friday, you can see that the warm front is pushed further northward, and at that time, and we're seeing big heat returning by that time into southwestern portion of the Corn Belt, but warm advection rain still occurring at that time, especially in eastern and northeastern portion of the Corn Belt, and also some good rains at that time with severe weather activity in the northern plains. By the time we get to 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, this is again a time frame when a lot of heat is going to be dominating the Corn Belt at that time, and this is really a classic ring of fire activity. You can see that with all of the heat really dominating the Corn Belt at that time, any appreciable rainfall is confined to just far northwestern portions of the Corn Belt, extreme northern and northeastern portions of the Corn Belt as well. Just kind of depends on the exact positioning of the frontal system. You can see that the GFS model in the upper right does not have the frontal system quite as far to the northeast, and also has some cooler air starting to move more quickly into northwestern portions of the Corn Belt at that time, so it would have a wetter forecast. But again, as the heat really starts to take control of the Corn Belt weather pattern for the end of this week, we will start to see the rainfall chances really diminishing in the Corn Belt at that time, and any rain that is seen really confined to just extreme northeastern and far northwestern portions of the Corn Belt for the end of this week and into very early portion of next week. Then we will be seeing the heat really breaking down again towards the end of the 6 to 10 day time frame. And as that heat breaks down, you'll start to see rainfall chances returning to really the heart of the Corn Belt at that time, as you can see from the various models. I would also be seeing quite a bit of rainfall returning to the plain states at that time. Probably an influx of moisture not only from the Gulf of Mexico, but also from the Pacific Ocean at that time, that would really be enhancing rainfall chances in the hard red winter wheat belt as we get towards middle to latter portion of the 6 to 10 day period, and that moisture also eventually working its way to some degree into the Corn Belt as well. So kind of totaling things up here for the next 10 days. Again, as usual, do not want to believe the specifics of these rainfall forecasts from the various models, but just pointing it out to show you that over the next 10 days, still no shortage of rainfall chances in the Corn Belt. Likely a situation where some portion of the Corn Belt on every day in that period is looking at rainfall on a lot of the days in that period, significant or even locally heavy in nature. Most limited rainfall chances as the heat expands for late this week through very early next week. Your better chances for more widespread rain is going to be occurring both early and late in the 10-day time frame. Those will be the coolest parts of the 10-day forecast as well. So again, certainly not a situation where we are looking at a dry weather pattern for the next 10 days. As far as temperatures are concerned, some moderation in temperature is going to be spreading from west to east across the Corn Belt for the next 4 days, although we will never completely eliminate the 90-plus degree high temperatures, especially in far southern and far southwestern portions of the Corn Belt. And then again, the big change in the forecast today versus what I presented on Friday is a much warmer forecast for the end of this week through very early portion of next week, a time frame when we are going to be seeing some legitimate summertime heat returning to the region. You can see this high temperature forecast as we get towards Saturday. Note the extensive area of 90-plus degree heat in the Corn Belt. Big area of 95 to 100 plus degree heat at that time, covering much of the southwestern Corn Belt and into a big portion of the plain states. And again, this will be the middle period of what should be the hottest time frame for the Corn Belt. Should be Friday through Sunday, in which the hottest temperatures are going to be seen in the Corn Belt, with again basically any place in the Corn Belt for at least one day during that time frame having a shot at 95 plus degree high temperatures. But as usual, your most extensive and best coverage of 95 plus degree heat is going to be in the western and southwestern Corn Belt, and a situation where we are probably going to be seeing some 100 plus degree heat in some areas at that time. So legitimate big time summer like heat in the Corn Belt for especially the end of this week and into the early portion of next week. You can see why that is going to be the case by looking at 500 millibars at that time. Note the big ridge of high pressure that is going to be seen in the middle of the country by all the models at that time. 588 heights, that is normally what one has to see before you can get any summer-like heat into the Corn Belt. From the 500 millibar pattern, working its way right into the heart of the Corn Belt. So really kind of a classic situation for some real summer-like heat into the Corn Belt starting for later on this week, but it's not going to be lasting for very long. By the time we get to the very beginning of the 11 to 15 day time frame, once again the heat is shoved way out west into far northwestern portions of the nation, some semblance of a trough of low pressure located in between the two ridges that are going to be located at 500 millibars at that time. Would not call that as an exceptionally cool weather pattern even at that time, but certainly more normal temperatures going to be seen for a lot of the 11 to 15 day time frame. Looking at 500 millibars for the end of the 11 to 15 day time frame, probably somewhat warmer air returning by that time into the nation, but even at this time would not call the overall weather pattern as extremely hot. Would not call it as extremely dry either. A bit of a northwest flow aloft indicated by the European ensemble would indicate some rainfall chances at that time. A bit of a dome of high pressure in far southern southwestern portion of the nation on the GFS model would probably indicate some ring of fire rainfall activity at that time. So nothing real concerning at this time as far as longer term weather patterns are concerned. Again, I wouldn't be surprised at all if the biggest heat in the 2-week forecast is going to be seen for late this week through early next week in the Corn Belt, and again emphasizing that the heat at that time will be quite significant in nature. But longer term, looking into the 11 to 15 day time frame, nothing real concerning shows up. Certainly not an overly cool weather pattern even for the 11 to 15 day time frame, but again the biggest heat coming for late this week, and I would certainly think that there would be additional rainfall chances even into the 11 to 15 day time frame as well. Looking at some international features this morning, certainly the dry season has started in northern Brazil, while additional rains will be seen in the southern Safrina corn areas during the next 2 weeks. In Europe, near to above normal rainfall in southern Europe during the next 2 weeks. Some of your biggest rains with respect to normal going to be occurring across the Balkans. Certainly beneficial rains there. More on the order of below normal rainfall across northern Europe, and of course below normal rainfall for the next 2 weeks for the wintergreen and summer row crop areas of the former Soviet Union. A lot of the rain that is shown there on that map for the former Soviet Union going to be occurring from now through about Wednesday, but even then only decent rains just in western Ukraine through Belarus. As we get towards late this week through the end of the 6 to 10 day period, a lot of the area in question probably seeing nothing in the way of rainfall. For the spring grain areas of the former Soviet Union, still looking at extensive rainfall there for the next 10 days and a generally cooler than normal weather pattern continuing there as well. For China, very nice rain is going to be seen over the next 2 weeks, above normal amounts for the Manchurian corn and soybean areas, with that rainfall evenly divided between the 1 to 5, 6 to 10, and 11 to 15 day time frames. Not an overly wet pattern for the next 2 weeks for the North China Plain, though note that portions of the North China Plain did see some nice rainfall amounts this past weekend. 10-day rainfall forecast for the Canadian prairies. Bulk of the rainfall that is shown in this map is going to be occurring during this work week period, and it will be short-changing southern and southwestern portions of Saskatchewan and into southern Alberta. All of the Canadian prairies then looking at dry conditions for the 6 to 10 day time frame. In Australia, the needed wet weather pattern there is still clearly not in the forecast. Generally below normal rainfall for Western Australian wheat areas for the next 2 weeks. Will be completely dry there for this entire week period in western and growing areas of Australia. Some rain going to be seen, especially over the next week, in some of the southeastern wheat growing areas of Australia, especially into South Australia in Victoria. After that, dry conditions, and even in the near term, a lot of that rainfall missing out on the wheat areas of New South Wales. Finally, for this morning in India, not an especially active Indian monsoon for at least the next 10 days. Maybe some increase in monsoonal activity for especially southern portions of the Indian subcontinent in the 11 to 15 day time frame. That's what I have for this morning. Everyone have themselves a great day.